Welcome, Anna. I'm so excited to have you here today with us on the PLA podcast. Years ago, when I first stepped into the head of people role, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I went to this first round hosted dinner and you were a speaker there that night. I remember the feeling I had when I heard you speak, which was I was like, Anna really knows her stuff. And if one day I could be a fraction of this amazing head of people and bottle that up, I would feel really proud about the type of head of people that I am. And I don't think I've ever mentioned that to you, but very early on, I was like, this woman is amazing. She's an incredible executive. And so I'm so thrilled that we can have you here today. And I know we last connected maybe a year plus ago at the Unleash conference in Las Vegas. And at the time, you were talking about how you were using AI with your team. I mean, it's hard to imagine a year ago, but a year ago, like everyone was talking about AI, but no one's actually doing anything with it. And so I thought it'd be perfect to have you on and to get your thoughts on all things people and AI and hear what you're up to these days. So thank you for joining us.
Jess, those are some of the nicest words that have been said to me or about me in public, and I'm going to share it with my mom. Thank you very much. I very much remember that first round dinner. It was a square table.
Yes.
And it was in their San Francisco space. There were a good amount of us. There were like 20 of us and a lot of companies in different stages and places in their journey. So it's really nice to be back with you. Thank you again.
Well, for those in our audience who don't know your incredible career and all the amazing things that you're up to now, could you provide a little bit more color and context for them?
Sure. I'm actually originally from Austria. My mother's German, my father's Austrian, and I lived there as a child. But I grew up in Connecticut, outside of New York City. I did a short stint at Boston University. They kicked me out for insubordination. I think that's a story for another podcast. I ended up at the University of Oregon, which truly changed my life. I found my people, I found my passion. I eventually moved to San Francisco from there. It was 1997. It was like the go-go internet days. And I had no idea what I wanted. I had no idea what I was doing. I think I had done like one email and I didn't have a cell phone. And I remember I was considering 3 or 4 different options to go into entry-level jobs. One was Farallon Capital, which is apropos today, founded and CEO by Tom Steyer. One was a magazine, like a sports running magazine. And one was a little internet startup that was doing rentals in the apartment space called Spring Street. And I did not know how to evaluate these companies. I didn't know what the jobs were, but I decided based on the CEO, and they were all pretty small endeavors, who did I want to work with and who did I think was the best or the smartest or the most compelling. And I ended up going to Spring Street, this online apartments rental place, because I thought that the CEO really gave me a tough interview. And I thought, if he gives me a tough interview, maybe that says something. So that's where I started. From there, went to another company in the email security space called Ironport. I was on the founding team there, eventually ran human resources, did a stint in business school at ESE in Barcelona. Then I did a tour of duty as a COO at a tiny startup in the staffing space using crowdsourcing and video technology. It gave me incredible empathy to be on the business side of trying to make really like a pig fly. Most startups don't succeed. That one did not succeed. And it gave me incredible empathy of, we had an HR person who was trying to get me to do the HR things. And it really informed my approach going forward because I had that tour of duty. Then I ended up at a company called MuleSoft. That was the last thing I did before I joined Asana in 2016. I joined Asana. We were 100 people. I was the first kind of official HR person, 10 million in revenue and 20,000 customers. And I was there for almost 10 years through COVID, through going public, up to hundreds and hundreds of millions of revenue and millions of customers.
What a journey. I look at your LinkedIn profile, Anna, and I think, wouldn't it be wonderful to spend 10 years at the same company and have the ride that you did? I'm sure it felt like 4 or 5 or more companies along the way as you went through the journey. I was also trying to recall when we first connected, and I think it's when you were at MuleSoft in the early days of People Tech Partners. I was still in financial services, making the transition into tech, and great time to be in HR tech. at the time. And one of the things that I'm most excited to talk with you about is to demystify for our listeners who tend to be mid to senior HR leaders, what the perspective is from board members. So you've had this wonderful run in big HR roles, and it's seasoned nicely by being in more business-oriented roles along the way. And now you're at what a lot of people consider the pinnacle, which is you're an advisor and an investor, and you serve on boards. And I'd love for you to share a little bit, and we can dig on this. What is it that board members really care about?
Let me take a step back. In the middle of my Asana tenure, with the encouragement of the CEO at Asana, I joined the Culture Amp board. That was a really natural fit for me because Culture Amp was at a stage in their growth trajectory that was a few years behind Asana. So my experience was really relevant as an operator. It's also a product that I use every day, a product that I could not do my job without. So my both fluency in the problem and the solution, my passion for the space, and my conviction around the details, like that made it such a good match. I still remember I was being interviewed by a reporter for the New York Times on some other topic right around the time that they were announcing my Culture Amp board edition. And she said something that I never let go of. She said, "Oh, you're joining the Culture Amp board. That makes perfect sense because both Asana and Culture Amp have strong points of view about the role of culture in business." It stuck with me for a long time. Being on the board of Culture Amp was incredibly valuable to me in my work as the chief people officer at Asana. As an operator, even as an executive operator, you are in the muck, right? Like you are thinking about the details and you are thinking about the problems and all the way up and down the stack in terms of how you're approaching it. A board member is 10 or 20 or 30,000 feet up. So I think it's important to, first of all, ask, what do your board members care about? Different board members care about different things. You need to have the relationships with each one of them that will engage with you to understand and give them what they want. You might have some things in the deck, but around what I call it board meeting season, different members will want different things, and your job is to give them that. It's not a game, just ask, right? Like you will quickly learn these people and their priorities. The second thing is around thinking about output versus outcome. A lot of people talk about, well, I did all this work and this was the output of that work. Nobody cares, and neither should you. What you care about were the outcomes. What were the results of that effort, of those outputs? The third thing I want to say about boards, and I learned this from a Culture Amp board member, and it goes both ways. We were preparing for one of the board meetings, and we had gotten all the materials, we had done all the preparations, and he said to me, "What's your one or two things?" He actually said, like, "What are your one or two bullets this meeting?" And I'm like, that's a little aggressive, but he's like, "You only get to make one or two really, really important, salient comments. What are they going to be?" And I thought it was so focusing, right? Like you got 100-page deck. What are the one or two things that are the most important? And I think that the same is true for the people that are preparing the material. I might be preparing 2 slides or 200 slides. What is the one or two things that I want the board to come away with? That's very difficult. In a quarter's worth of work, in a fast growth, high pace, scaling, highly competitive environment, you want me to come up with one or two? It's nearly impossible. And yet it is what you need to do. I think most executive teams do it in the same way, right? Like you kind of divide the sections either by function or topic, and everybody prepares their slides. And then, you drop it all into a slide deck, and somebody hopefully is like looking at all of them. But it is stunning to me how disconnected they are. And I think in particular for the chief people officer, your slides and your one or two things have to be connected to what's going on in the business.
Anna, I really appreciate you calling out the concept, and I think this is important for our listeners, that not all board members are the same. It's not a monolithic group. there are different people with different backgrounds that are on the board for different reasons that may have different interests.
Yep.
And so you being on the board of Culture Amp represented a few things. One is you were a high usage customer. You knew the product inside and out. You were a true believer. You were an advocate for it. So there's potentially some commercial advocacy. There's some product connection. You're a few years ahead in the growth journey of an org that both orgs were rocket ships, venture backed, and you could see around corners and predict some of the organizational needs. So that's a valuable role to represent. And then, you're the chair of the comp committee. So there's some subject matter content knowledge that could be, really useful to put into play on the board as well. And maybe succession planning, and, it's all kind of wrapped up in, a few years ahead. And so for our listeners, and I'd love for you to add some context to this, we want to be at the board meeting. We want to elevate and be part of that senior team and impact the business. And part of that is understanding who our stakeholders are and what they care about.
Yeah.
And so like step one may be understand the board are key stakeholders.
Yeah.
And you probably need to understand where they're each coming from to understand what they're contributing and what they care about along the way.
And what you might have done as a chief people officer at one company with one board might be very different because the business is different, the environment is different, the stage is different, and the human being is different. Paying attention to that and adjusting is really, really important. The last thing I'll say is just this might sound silly, but if you are in the boardroom, do not be on your computer. This is where you have the opportunity to level up this 10 or 20,000 feet. And it might be a topic that is so orthogonal to your work, and yet it's core to everything that you do. Take advantage of that opportunity.
There's probably a Goldilocks zone, right? You don't want to over contribute. And I don't think there are a lot of HR people that overstep in the board meeting and say too much. More often, I find there to be this tendency of, I'm just happy to be in the room. And I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm not going to say anything unless asked. And there's probably a Goldilocks zone somewhere in there.
Something in between. And I've seen that with chief people officers and other functions as well. They present their section and then they sort of okay, mine is done. And I'm going to go into my little zone. An incredible group of people that's there for your company. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. If we could double click into that, because you're mentioning, hey, there is a range. It really depends on your board and the company and sort of the norms. And sometimes you're only coming in to present your couple of slides and then you leave the room. Sometimes you can stay and take advantage. But whether it's before the meeting, during the meeting, or after, what are some of the things that a listener might be able to take away from this of should I be reaching out to board members? How often should I be speaking to them? If I know that Anna is the chair of the compensation committee, what would my relationship look like with her? And maybe this is a sprinkling more than here's exactly what you need to do with your board. What are some of the tactical things that you might suggest putting on the radar for somebody who's listening to this going, I don't know what to do with my board. What is that range I should be even considering?
You mentioned it, start with a comp committee, or at Culture Amp, we call it the People and Culture Committee because it's broader than just compensation. If you don't have a comp committee, put one together. You can stand up a comp committee to help guide and input and shape compensation and people and culture decisions. It might not have the governance of a true comp committee, but you can create it so that you can start building that muscle for the company, not necessarily for you, but for the company. That's probably your starting point and you're in. I would connect with that comp committee chair, sort of a third of the way into the quarter and say, here's what I'm thinking for the next meeting. What do you want to see? These are the decisions that need to be made. This is the material I'm connecting or I'm going to put together for it. As part of that, I'm talking to her around, this is what's on the calendar for the comp committee, but I want you to know these are the challenges and, use them as a sounding board. They often sit on other boards. So their ideas and perspective, I found that to be incredibly valuable. The second thing is by being in the room for the board meeting and also by participating in recruiting that board, I got to know board members and a little bit about both their expertise, their zones of genius, and their passions. And so there were a couple of people that I would like naturally go to because I knew A, they had perspective, and B, they had their tentacles in so many other things. And I'm like, tell me what's going on in your other companies. And then the third thing that I think is worth mentioning is culture and company building is a full team sport. I would ask board members to come in and talk to the company. We might do a fireside chat, or we might do quick takes on the last quarter from this investor. I used board members to help close candidates. Obviously, I used board members to engage with them to assess executive talent. It goes both ways. Like, they then understand the company a little bit more and get empathy for the operational challenges. And then for employees, it helps engender trust. It helps demystify, who are these people here. Those are some of the things that I've done over the course of the years.
I have a point of view, having worked with private equity organizations and participating with investors on a bunch of different boards, but those tend to be boards that have control rather than a venture board or a public company board. And I've seen both, but more so PE. There can be a real reluctance from some CEOs to allow access from their team to the board, especially where the board might have control of the company, the investors have controlling interest.
Yeah.
The CEO tends to be, I've found, not always, tends to be pretty anxious that, hey, I don't really want to share our dirty laundry unless I have the opportunity to position it. And I don't really want to, ask for help on something that I might not ultimately want the help on. And so there can be a lot of controlling behavior of C-suite by the CEO. And it doesn't sound like it was that way at all with Culture Amp, but do you have a perspective on how to deal with that anxiousness that might be common from a CEO and their directs talk to board members?
And so a couple of things. First of all, I haven't worked in a PE-backed environment. I just want to caveat, I don't know that perspective. Secondly, in a non-PE, so in a venture-backed or a public company, there are definitely some CEOs who like to control that. And well, number one, you have to be respectful of that. Number two, you need to ask yourself why. What's behind that? And is it indicative of other things? Most of the time, I have worked with CEOs who are like, the board is here to help us be successful. At Asana, we are incredibly mission driven. We would use language and have like mindset of the board is here to help us achieve our mission. To the extent that our executive team can leverage members of the board to help them on a whole host of different things, we had direction from the CEO and the co-founder to go do that. I would say, I think it's important to be careful. My experience as a board member at Culture Amp, you might be brought in to give some advice on something. You want to be careful in saying, I'm a board member and I'm expressing an opinion. This is not me giving direction because you don't take direction from me. This is just my thought. Because it's really easy for an executive at a company to say, so-and-so on the board told me this, so I need to go do that. It's just wrong, right? And so I'm very thoughtful around that.
Understanding the dynamics and where decision-making authority resides, that's just smart as a senior leader.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'd love to dive further into your time at Asana. At 9.5 years as a CHRO in a VC-backed company that goes through all the way through IPO, it is not that common that we see that level of longevity. And I'm sure you've been asked before, but we're all wondering, what makes this role sustainable over time? So many of us burn out after a few years. Part of it Andrew alluded to of it was 4 or 5 different companies in the time that you were there. But what allowed you to sustain through that time? Did you ever feel like you were getting burned out? How did you think about that or sustain through it?
So first of all, I really did love it out loud. I deeply, genuinely enjoyed it. Talk about hitting the jackpot, right? To have a job that you love out loud. I wish that on everyone to have that opportunity. So 3 things. As Andrew mentioned, it's a new job. Sometimes it's a new job every quarter, but it's definitely a new job every year. And being proactive in changing how I approached the job and the structure and the team and my engagement and what I focused on. I'm a big believer that your values and your priorities live in two places and two places alone. And one is your budget and the second is your calendar. That is true of a human being and that is true of a company. If you want to see what matters, you look at those two things. And so I was very intentional about how I crafted my time in a kind of methodical way, aligned with, hey, this is a new company. And while last quarter I was doing a lot of this, now I need to do this. The second thing is at Asana, which is different than other companies I've been at, I was able to assemble an outstanding team. And the difference from like a great team to an outstanding team buys you everything. I kind of had a lot of pinch me moments. Like, I can't believe this group of individuals who is so strong and could actually do my job in their own right now have gone on to be chief people officers at other places. Like the fact that we were like a team together and they were willing to, with all the options they had, do this with me here at this company, like that buys you millions, like in self-motivation and again, joy. The last thing I'll say just about burnout, some people believe that or shorthand that burnout is about working really hard. I kind of reject that, right? Like if you love what you're doing and you're enjoying it and it's interesting and I think burnout is a function of doing work about work. Like I'm doing this work. I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know how it connects to the mission and the purpose. And Asana, largely from a values perspective, but from the nature of the product, we did everything that we could to avoid work about work. So priorities were clear, ownership was clear, right? Like that's the whole premise of the Asana product. I didn't feel burnout in that way. Now, one note, asterisk, comment, the pandemic was rough. It was generally a rough time to be an HR lady. I feel like it was particularly rough at Asana for two reasons. One, we were so hyper growth. We were onboarding 20 new people every 7 days. It was crazy. The second is we made a business decision, and I think it was the right decision. Once we could, we were returning to office. We were going to have a slight hybrid situation, but we were always fully committed to being in person. And we made that decision and announcement in May of 2020. As you can imagine, they were throwing tomatoes at us through that journey, right? Like everybody else is going remote and you do you and blah, blah, blah. And our CEO and our leadership team believed fundamentally that we were better off as a company to be together. And that was hard to be the voice and face of that. And I will never forget, was performance review season and I wrote my self-review, and my self-review included this, I can't wait until we're at the other end of this or on the other side of this. And then I can get back to doing real work. I'll never forget it. Dustin, our CEO, said, maybe I need you to ask you to reframe your thinking because this is actually the real work. This is actually how you're having incredible impact on our company and our business. Please don't try to hurry and get on the other side of it because this really matters. And like many things that I learned from him, it really fundamentally shifted. So that period was a little bit burnout-y, but it wasn't because I was working so hard. It was because my mindset had to shift around the value of the work.
I'd love to get your perspective on in the HR role.
Yep.
You left MuleSoft about a year before they IPO'd.
Yep.
Headed the function there, headed the function at Asana, and took the whole ride with Asana. Mm-hmm. Within the People Leader Accelerator community, we talk about we grow CHROs and we help people take that ride and take it longer and extend their runway. Ideally, that's the outcome. You were really successful at leading the function at Asana through multiple sizes and stages and iterations and IPOs. What helped you be successful doing that through those various molting periods, through those various plateaus?
First of all, I don't know if I'm a good prototype. Unusually, I've only ever had one type of HR job. I know a little bit about all of them, enough to fake it and play it on TV, but I could never go get a job as a head of a sub HR function. So I've only ever done one job. I'm not sure that my path or my advice here is useful, but I'll talk about it a little bit. The second thing I'll say is, and at Asana, as we were going through growth, I would often say, there's three big stages of a company, right? Like the founding, like the first group of kind of believers, and like, let's call it like maybe 0 to 50 people. Like it's just those small group of believers that are there from like pre-product market fit. Then there is the second archetype, which is the scaling. Like we're going to put in systems and process and allow ourselves to go up the mountain, which like it's putting stairs into a hillside. And then there's a third phase, and it's often might be going public, or you may be hitting hundreds of millions in revenue. I don't know, but it's that third. The growth definitely slows down. You might be doing more M&A. It's just like a different chapter. And so I've always said most people have a sweet spot of one of those phases. Some really extraordinary, unique folks do 2 of them, but pretty much nobody, maybe Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like can go through all 3. I think it's important to like identify, like, where are you happy? Where are you best? And do that and be there, and don't get banging your head against the wall because you're not happy in the scaling mode. If you're really like an inventor that's meant to be at the beginning, just like know who you are and be there. If I'm honest, like at Ironport, I was in that pre-product market fit and at ReadyForce, and I think I got lucky. That middle section, that scaling section, that's where I thrive. I can play on TV the other 2, but no, like that's where I enjoy myself.
That's great advice.
What I was going to double click into was you would mention something about finding great versus exceptional talent. And I think understanding who you are and where you play is part of it. I wanted to dive further into that of like what else distinguishes these really exceptional people that like, can you find it during the interview process, or how did you unlock that in your team to really take them to that next level? Because I think that is what distinguishes great people leaders from exceptional people leaders too, is this element is you have exceptional people supporting you. And you're mentioning, I'm not an expert in all the areas. And even people who grew up in the function cannot be experts in every single area. And so this excellence is something I'd love to hear further about from your perspective.
Yeah. One of the downsides of, my whole career of being a chief people officer is when I was younger and less experienced, the biggest impediment to being successful is that people didn't want to work for me. The CEO trusted me, the executive team trusted me, even the board trusted me, but people didn't want to work for me. They're like, you're young, you're inexperienced, you don't know what you're doing. It's a real blocker, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, I will never forget, it was at Ironport, and our head of international sales, a guy named Shrey Bhatia, said to me, Anna, would you consider every single individual on your team exceptional? Because I actually, when I look at my team, every individual that reports to me is exceptional. I was so annoyed by it, but I've thought about it since then. And it really took until I got to Asana that I had the experience and the credibility and the opportunity to hire people that were outstanding. It was a motivator throughout the whole journey to get them there. And then just like in the brass tacks, right? Like I believe in hiring systems, meaning I believe in what are my criteria for this role. You don't get to have 10 things that are important. You only get to have 3 or 4. And I am going to look and search and interview until I find somebody that is outstanding in those 3 or 4 criteria. This was probably the most acute for me when I was trying to hire a head of talent acquisition in 2017, 18. I was competing with every name brand company in the world. For an entire year, I had 17 direct reports because I didn't have that talent acquisition leader. I interviewed and I kissed more frogs than I had in my entire career. I think I made 3 offers that got rejected until I found the one. And she was incredible. And she came and transformed the function. But all tough times and bad dates are good stories when you look back at them. Like now I can tell the story, but during it, it was rough going.
Yeah. And it must have been so tempting to be like, oh, maybe this frog is good looking enough for right now for just a little bit of a Band-Aid. And it is so tempting to do that.
But I did that over and over again until I remember the day that I had a similar conversation with a leader at Asana who said, I asked him in a little bit of a less annoying fashion, like, hey, are all the people on your team outstanding? And he was quiet and he said, well, no, not like yours is. I felt like I had arrived.
I wonder if there's a suggestion or a recommendation for our listeners that are building teams? Like, how did you see through that stage of, hey, I don't have somebody in place today? Did you get vendor support? Did you get
Good question.
contractors, interims? Like, did you
Yeah.
just do more yourself? Like,
Yeah.
how did you manage?
There's a fun it was called If Everything is Important, Nothing is Important. And when you have 17 direct reports, you have to choose. I've never heard somebody say, don't do one-on-ones, but for that year, I didn't do one-on-ones. And I had a lot of outstanding talent on that team, but I just couldn't. What am I going to do? 17 one-on-ones a week? And basically, I held office hours and I said, if you need something, like, let's do it. And once a month, you'd have 15 minutes. And it was often as I was walking to the car. And it was not a reflection of like, I don't care about you. This is called survival mode. Another fun fact, it was actually the year I got married, and I got married 3 times in 2 countries over the course of 4 weeks. So it was not a simple summer.
Same person, though.
Same person, one dress, one dress, one pair of shoes. But we traveled to people instead of having them travel to us, and I said no to a lot of things. I remember our COO at the time was making like a critical hire, an executive level hire. And he said, I would like you to be my partner on this, not just like running the search, because the exec search firm can do that, but I want you to be the person that's like helping me assess in the early rounds who we move forward, because this is such a unique role and we're really shaping it. And I said, no. He was stunned. And I said, I have a list. Until I hire this individual, these are the most important things. And I'll show you the list of 6 things. And if you want me to put that on, one of these things needs to go. He was like, I really admire your prioritization, and I'm really annoyed that you're not prioritizing.
Wait, he agreed with your prioritization? Is that?
I mean, begrudgingly. He didn't care about as much, but other members of the executive team or my CEO cared about. And I'm like, I'm happy to get us all in a room, but I am past the point of doing more faster, right? Like this year, I have committed to fully working 6 days a week, but not 7.
That's exemplar ruthless prioritization right there, because it hurts. It's not easy. People don't always love it or love you for it.
I like to get an A on everything that I do, everything. And so to say to somebody who I respected, whose work was important, and really cared about the relationship, to say no is.
What allowed you to feel confident enough with that executive to be able to say no and know that your relationship could withstand it?
Hiring at the time was an existential risk to the company. I had the recruiting leader decide that they wanted to move to Europe. And so I didn't have a recruiting leader. And so it was very focusing. I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here, like, I exist to help the business move forward. So I'm going to make decisions on what I think are the 5 most important things for me to spend my time on to do that. And then I'm very open to a conversation of, hey, these are not the right 5 things. And I'm constantly thinking about that. But if I add 2 more, then those first 5 are going to suffer. And I didn't think about it in terms of confidence in it. Like, I respectfully explained it, like it wasn't a rejection of him or what was important to him.
What I'm hearing underneath that is actually it is the company was coming first, and it was existential to the
Yeah.
company that these pieces got prioritized and solved. And so while relationships are important, it actually was secondary, and rightly so, to the company's survival.
I mean, I might argue slightly different, that
Okay.
the relationship didn't come second. I was very clear with him, right? Like, I could have said yes and done that a half-assed job or ghosted the work, and that would have done damage to the relationship. I was being clear, and clarity is kindness. He knew then that he had to either figure out somebody else to be a partner or fill the holes himself or ask the search firm to play a role. But I thought about it as investing in the relationship, not putting the relationship at risk.
Thank you for that nuance. I think that's an important clarification there. Maybe that rolls into a topic that's more forward-looking around how the CHR role is changing right now, partially, if not a lot, because of AI and different expectations coming in. But how do you see the CHR role evolving?
I believe that today and tomorrow's chief people officer is front and center in this transformation. The AI transformation that we're going through is a human capital phenomenon above being a technological one. So this is not the time to advise or partner. It's the time to lead, to own it, to drive. Don't wait to be assigned some project or permission. Just grab it. It is time. Go for it. Like that, I think, is a fundamentally changing piece. We recently had this outrageous thing where the CEO of Bolt talked about eliminating his HR team. And I was really disappointed in the HR community's reaction to it. I was disappointed that people were so like outraged and up in arms and like, doesn't this guy understand? And let's model out a few things. Like, here's what happens if you eliminate your HR team. As opposed to taking a moment and saying, well, what would happen if we didn't have an HR team? In what way, how? There's a great conscious leadership concept of how might the opposite of your story be true? And maybe as HR leaders, we should go through an exercise to say, in what ways would the company be stronger if the function were fundamentally transformed or eliminated? That's not me advocating for it. But that is me saying, let's pause and say, when we hear things that outrage us, that boil our blood, maybe we should get curious, like with the instinct behind it and the possibility behind it. Relatedly, and a little bit less controversial, I've seen HR leaders say, well, if we have AI replace all of our entry-level jobs, who will we grow and mentor and groom into the senior positions? I would say, hey, there are examples of people that never did those entry-level jobs that have always had a leadership position. How might we be ready for that world?
That is mind-blowing for me, as you talked about just fundamentally rethinking, like, let's explore this issue. Let's think about org design. Let's think about how to meet our goals rather than assume that it works perfectly the way it does today. I think there's a lot that we can take away from that. We have just a few more minutes with you, and I want to make sure that we capture a few of our most precious nuggets in what we call our accelerator round questions. From your perspective, learning and growth for our listeners, if you could recommend just 2 resources, might be a person, a book, a tool that could help an emerging human resources leader, what 2 sources would you point people towards?
The first one is, and this may be old school, but I still live by so many of the stories that I read about in Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. In particular, the story of her and her husband showing up at the soccer game 20 minutes late, and they're both like racing to get there. And she jumps out of the car feeling terrible for how late and how much they've missed. And you know what Dave Goldberg said? He said, high five. We both made it. We get to walk in together. This is amazing. You don't have to pitch a perfect game. You just need to win the game. And showing up, whether it's 20 minutes late, you showed up, you got there. That's winning the game. Number 2, I encourage all HR people to not read HR blogs, save for this podcast, of course. But like, go read business blogs, go read The Economist, go deep on the technology. You as an HR person are a business person that is there to drive the business forward.
I think there's a lot of linkage here with our next accelerator question, which is, what one sentence of advice might you offer about how to accelerate a successful HR career today?
I'm a business person first, and my job is to use the people function to drive the business forward. And I think if you ask yourself that every single day, like, what am I working on and how's it moving the business forward? And demand that everyone on your team is doing the same, you will get there faster.
Anna, for our listeners that want to hear more from you and get more of these insights and your futurism, how can they connect with you?
Obviously, I'm on the LinkedIn, but my email is anna@annabinder.com. Don't be shy. I'm like kind of still old school, and I communicate with people and I meet up for coffee and chat. I really believe in this function. I believe in the importance of it to drive the business and the mission forward. And I'd love to connect with anyone with as much passion as I do about it.
Anna, thank you so much for sharing your passion and wisdom with us today. It's a true honor to have you here with us on PLA Podcast.
It's great. It's fun to chat with both of you.